Dogs are great. They keep you company. They bark at strangers. Their paws smell like tortilla chips. But they could do better. Maybe they're too needy. Maybe they can't bring you the paper, or even read the paper. Maybe they'd be useless in a gremlin outbreak. Yet, despite their shortcomings, we tolerate and love them, unless we're allergic or scared. But since at least the 1960s, we flirted with the unthinkable, replacing them. Allow me to explain. Dinky electronic dogs were a given during the toy craze of the 1980s and 1990s. And the early 2000s gave us a mini-fad of entertainment robots that took the job of new dog much more seriously. But why haven't they caught on? And why aren't real dogs more nervous? The first stab at a robotic canine companion happened in a peaceful era where social structures were the glue that held America together. The 1960s. That's right, hippies. Long hair, bell bottoms, sit-ins, tune-ins, and Smothers Brothers. You bet your sweet bippy. The civil rights movement was in full swing, and America was in need of some upheaval. First stop, dogs.
Gaylord! Gaylord! Gaylord, you look kinda crazy, you move kinda lazy, see what he'll do.
Meet Gaylord. No, really meet him. Look at that confident saunter. This is a dog making a statement, and that statement is, please kill me. If fancy robot dogs of the future are we, then Gaylord was Methuselah. Clearly there were some kinks to work out. When your ad reps come up with a jingle that describes your product as looks kind of crazy and walks kind of lazy, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board. You certainly don't want to show a child struggling to match the slow speed of the... Oh, wait, they did it. At least they weren't writing checks that old Gaylord couldn't cash. Gaylord was a crude imitation of a dog, one that was firmly marketed as a toy, but the writing was on the wall for real dogs. If, during one of the most tumultuous eras of American history, someone stepped forward and announced that replacing dogs was priority number one, I would be sweating if I could. But dogs can't sweat. You know what can? Robots. Gaylord, with his remarkable name, was operated by an internal motor powered by 4 D-cell batteries, just like the real thing. He came with a leash that, when attached to his collar and tugged, made Gaylord walk forwards, or backwards. He had a magnet in his nose to pick up a bone toy, but Gaylord wasn't long for this world. 1 year after Gaylord was introduced, President Kennedy was assassinated. And that's the last time we ever heard from Gaylord. The rest of the 60s and 70s went by without a hitch, and by a hitch, I mean any more mechanical dogs. The 1970s were dominated, that's right, I misspelled dominated in the script, by a new kind of pet, the pet rock. Yes, the war against dogs had advanced, but this time we were fighting fire with rock. It was a short-lived fad, but the writing was once again on the wall for dogs. Your time is drawing to a close. A rock-shaped bullet was dodged when the pet rock floundered in sales, maybe because it was a rock. And it was back to the drawing board for toy engineers and dog haters, and that Venn diagram is one big circle. While the Soviets were dreaming up ways to decimate capitalism, we had an iron curtain of our own. Spotbot. Wow. It's almost like looking in a dog mirror. Spotbot was made by Tomy, one of the few electronics and toy manufacturers based out of Japan. Tomy had already created the human counterpart to the Spotbot, called the Omnibot. Omnibots bucked trends of toy advertising that had talked down to its audience of children, instead opting to portray the product in a menacing light, warning kids that they would soon be answering to an Omnibot for their sins. Look, a little homeless Omnibot. Kids sure love robo-hobos in their commercial breaks. Of course, Omnibots weren't meant to merely hold a cutesy mirror up to the scarred visage of 1980s society. They were a Trojan horse, meant to create a problem that could only be solved with more Omnibots. And in time, Omnidogs. Wait, that's right. They were called Spotbots. They weren't called Omnidogs? What the hell were they thinking? Just as Omnibots were meant to reflect human society, Spotbots were a reflection of dog society, useless bricks that existed solely to chase their own tail. While the next decades showed a slow in the propagation of robo-dogs, the writing was on the wall. Spotbot planted a seed in the minds of the next generation of engineers. Dogs must be replaced. And in 1999, the war truly began. When I say 1999, what do you think of? Is it Jawbreaker? It should be. It should also evoke a feeling of a future that never was. What with flying cars that stayed on the ground, sleeveless turtleneck fleeces that protected the chest from the cold while keeping the guns warm, and tiny little CDs meant to replace normal-sized CDs, because as we all know, the size of the CD was the problem. 1999 was also the harbinger of the undisputed king of the robot dogs, the first champion of cyber caninery, the one, the only, Rover the Space Dog. It was also the year of the Aibo. Aibo. Just the name sounds like a breath of new life. Aibo. Sony said the name was a composite of the English term artificial intelligence robot and a Japanese word for friend. But we all know it was secretly named after Beau Bridges' autobiography. Aibo was among the first of a new class of robot dubbed an entertainment robot, which is most certainly not a demeaning title for a robot. The first generation model of Aibo went on sale and immediately took the world by storm. And for good reason. This was the real deal. It had sensors to detect touch and sound, it could talk to you with a little beep-boop mouth, and it had small LED lights that helped it communicate. Walk me. Aibo went on sale in Japan and America on June 1st, 1999, for the US price of $2,500, which in 2025 money is $30 trillion. In Japan, the little so's and so's sold out in 20 minutes. America wasn't as interested, but still sold through 2,000 allocated units in 4 days. 4 days! That's how long it took me to watch each of the Bourne movies. I kept falling asleep! To combat the unexpected demand, Sony released a second wave of Aibo that November, thus proving that at one point in time, Sony knew how to handle things like this. Even that second wave was too popular for Sony to handle, with only 10,000 units available and 135,000 requests. In February of 2000, Sony began accepting orders again, this time with no limits. Hey, wait a second. Clever. Almost too clever. With the success of the first generation Aibo, the writing was on the wall. Dogs, your days are numbered. The year 2000 showed consumer interest in not only Aibo, but several other competitors in the robot dog arena. Chief among them, the poo-chi. If Aibo was an F-22 Raptor, then poo-chi was a Teddy Ruxpin with a desk fan strapped to its back. In other words, poo-chi was fantastic. They had love in their eyes.
Poo-chi, he's got love in his eyes.
Poo-chi wasn't as advanced as Aibo, sure, but it did have Aibo beat in the cuteness department. They could talk. They could sing royalty-free standards. They could interact with each other and told you how they felt with little LED eyes. They even came with a bone, in homage to the one who started it all. The cute, colorful ears and metallic body were a hit with kids, and were copied by other, less successful ass dogs like Big Scratch and Little Scratch. Where Aibo and poo-chi were solitary creatures, Big Scratch and Little Scratch set out to prove that robotic dogs can and will reproduce. They looked closer to real dogs in terms of proportion and style, and could even catch robot fleas and ticks, immune to the effects of Robo-Lyme disease. Unfortunately, Little Scratch wasn't all there, and its Bushimian eye structure nearly set the Robo-Dog movement back 6 weeks. But where failure ends, oh my god! Oh, it's Rocket the Wonder Dog. I thought I had died for a moment. Rocket was like a cross between Poo-chi and Big and Little Scratch, but before you tell me that was a bad idea, they fixed the eyes. Sort of. Rocket was less crazy Guggenheim and more Jim Belushi, which probably took a whole week of focus testing to nail down, but was lacking in terms of functionality. If you wanted to talk to Rocket, you'd have to do so through a headset like a crazed stage manager begging Belushi to sit or roll over. Rocket also came with a bone, an homage to the one who started it all. But Rocket didn't even like bones, and kids didn't like Rocket. The less we say of his fate, the better. He was shot in the head. But there's no time to mourn crappy robot dogs. Not when Mr. Time Magazine is knocking at the door. Meet Techno the robotic puppy. And yes, she's on the cover of Time. And yes, she's standing on top of a mountain of cocaine and barbed wire. You would too if you were replacing man's best friend.
A puppy? Who's gonna walk him?
Techno was a crossbreed between a poo-chi and an aibo. A poo-bo, if you will. But instead of retaining the whimsical aesthetics of the poo-chi, it had more in common with the sleek and futuristic form factor of aibo. It could do all the crap the other robot dogs could do, but also like aibo, Techno was meant to learn and evolve over time. A concept that certainly wasn't touched upon in the film Evolver, starring Hollywood mega-hunk Ethan Embry. The real winning element with Techno was the price point. $40 was all you needed to plop down to get yourself one of these new robot dogs.
$40?
And a $40 cat killer is nothing to sneeze at. If Time Magazine was any indication, it was Techno's world, and we were all just living in it. It's not like Time has ever put anything bad on the cover, right? Not ones to rest on their laurels, Sony continued to update aibo and ensured that market dominance wouldn't be lost to Techno. The aibo assault had started in earnest, with appearances in Janet Jackson music videos, Frasier episodes, and daytime talk shows. The writing was on the wall. Mutts, start packing your doggy bags. Robot dogs are taking over, and they can do everything. Take a look at Ice Saibi. That's right. It's 2001 and nothing matters. If you want a robot dog that can breakdance on loop while you struggle to reach the phone to call the police, there's never been a better time to be alive. Do you love music? Get yourself an iDog. Plug your headphones into its skull and it plays your music. Real dogs only do that for ska albums. 2005 heralded the birth of this musical mutt, and the following year delivered a death blow to dogs.
It's Lucky, the incredible Wonder Pup.
Oh, wait. Maybe I'm thinking of a different dog. What the hell is this thing? That's not a dog. It looks like a praying mantis got busy with a horse. But no matter. Dogs have been humiliated thoroughly and won't be pushing back. Gah! Let's pretend that didn't happen. So, aside from a blip, 2007 got us back on track with Mio Pup.
Mio Pup is the friend you love and take care of.
Okay, no it didn't. Maybe we forgot what dogs looked like during this era. There was a lot of good TV that distracted us. Lost, Mad Men, Friday the Animated Series. Let's move on to 2008. Now we're talking. Meet Jinibo, the Korean aibo knockoff who lived to remind us that regular dogs simply couldn't do this. While the price was a bit regressive, $1,500 for one of these bad boys, the writing was on the wall. Dogs, I hope you liked your spot at the foot of the bed. Because 2008 also gave us President Barack Obama, also known as Rex the dog. What? Have you ever seen them in the same room? Rex was a return to form for robot dogs in the sense that it was a literal return to dog form. But his cartoonish mug lacked any seriousness. How can you trust this dog to protect your family? If an intruder crossed paths with aibo, they'd be vaporized very cutely and efficiently. But Rex would probably just stare stupidly, eyes rolling into the back of his head, unable to help because no one can figure out how the hell his controller works. This is supposed to be intuitive? For who? A one-man band? Rex could also...
What you got for me?
Rex could also...
Oh, yeah!
Rex could also talk, but it was limited to a series of short sentences and grunts, effectively making him the dog version of Tim the Toolman Taylor. Rex was made by WowWee, the same company that made Robopet, and arguably morons. But that's if you ask me, and I'm an expert on morons. Speaking of which, meet Wappy Dog.
Kids love video games. And kids love dogs.
Now see them brought together in a whole new way.
Oh, Nintendo wants a piece of the action? Come and get it! Sorry, dogs, the writing is on the wall. 2011's Wappy Dog was a physical manifestation of a Nintendog, which was a little ghost of a dog that lived in your kid's DS. Wappy Dog didn't look like a Nintendog, and it didn't move on its own. It mostly could sit and stand, and told you every hour on the hour how much money you spent on it.
You need a bath.
Great work, Wappy Dog. Maybe let's change that name. 2012 was a backslide for digital dogs, with more basic science-based toys like the build-your-own RoboPup and toys that featured heavy iPhone integration, like the Bandai Smart Pet. But no one wants a dog with a phone for a face. A phone with a dog for a face is just enough, thank you. But 2013 gave us a glimpse of hope. Meet Zoomer. And I know what you're thinking. Another robot dog with 1,000,000 degrees of rotation for each leg. Great. Give me back the dog with a phone for a face. But let me stop you right there. Because this little puppy can pee. Look at him go!
On my phone, really?
They should have called this guy Whizzer. Unfortunately, all Zoomers were boy dogs, and they were bred to be lysine deficient, so they weren't able to repopulate and thus died alone. Which brings us to the modern age. Robot dogs have grown increasingly rare. What was once a boom in RoboPet ownership has turned into a micro-hobby. WowWee still has some skin in the game, having introduced Chip in 2015.
For ages, the dog has been man's best friend. We want to introduce you to man's new best friend. Meet Chip.
Chip had a punchable face and an even more punchable name, and was upgraded to the Dog-E a few years later. Dog-E has a feature called minting, which means that when you uncrate her, she bonds with you or whatever. But more importantly, she poops.
When Doggy has to go, you'll hear a noise and see a poop emoji in the tail.
Robot dogs can pee and poop now. Sure, there are still some quote-unquote robot dogs that are more like cyber horses or bionic nightmare machines, but there's still some good to be done at least. While they haven't replaced the real thing yet, they still serve as companions to those who are unable to have a living dog monster. Sony relaunched Aibo in 2016, this time in all lowercase, since it's the future, and has provided them to hospitals for therapeutic use. And then there's Ginny from Tombot, a robot dog who was designed specifically to assist users who need companionship, particularly those with dementia. Way to go, Ginny. Show those real dogs how it gets done. Have robotic dogs managed to usurp the canine throne after all these decades? Not quite. But the writing has been on the wall since Gaylord slowly trudged out of the primordial ooze back in the 1960s. What's taking so long? Maybe it's been the prohibitive cost, or the lack of actual blood. Maybe it's been the sterile aesthetics, or the overly goofy ones. Maybe it's because they don't look at you in your eye when they know you're lying about dinner time. But if dogs like Ginny are any indication, the writing is on the wall. But while we wait for the perfect mechanical mutt to melt our hearts, we'll simply have to cope with what we have now. Now, where did I put my dog? Gaylord!
Gaylord!